Yo, what is going on, everyone? My name is Nick, or the Notorious Fantasy, and in today's video, we're going to be doing a 12-team PPR mock draft on the 7th overall spot using FantasyPros Draft Wizard. The roster positions for today's mock are 1 quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, a tight end, 2 flex spots, a kicker defense, and 5 bench spots. And we're going to be drafting up against the ESPN, NFL, and Sleeper ADP. But before we can get on into this mock draft, I would like to ask that if you guys are new to the channel and you do end up enjoying today's video, that you please make sure to hit that subscribe button down below. And while you're down there, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure that you do leave a like on today's video. It would help me out a ton. If you want to follow me on Twitter or X, please do so at NotoriousFantasy. So without further ado, let's get into this 12-team PPR mock draft from the 7th overall spot. So entering into your draft from the 7th overall spot, there is typically going to be the players around this range of Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Bijan Robinson, Breece Hall, Amon-Ra St. Brown. Now, some of those guys are going to get taken ahead of you, but typically that is around the range of player that you are going to be able to select. So the draft starts with Christian McCaffrey, followed by CeeDee Lamb, Tyreek Hill, Breece Hall, Justin Jefferson, and Bijan Robinson, with McCaffrey, Breece, and Bijan all off of the board. To me, that would eliminate me taking a running back, because while I love Saquon Barkley, Jonathan Taylor, and Jahmyr Gibbs, I feel like taking one of those guys ahead of Amon-Ra St. Brown or Jamar Chase, Garrett Wilson, A.J. Brown, that range of wide receiver, to me, feels like a little bit of a reach. Now, if you want to argue for taking one of those running backs ahead of Garrett Wilson, A.J. Brown, I get it a lot more, but when McCaffrey, Breece, and Bijan are gone, I am 100% going to be eyeing down the wide receiver position, and for me, it's a no-brainer on Amon-Ra St. Brown. Amon-Ra St. Brown is on an offense that is going to be top 5 in passing attempts yet again. Amon-Ra St. Brown is the clear number 1 weapon on this offense. Amon-Ra St. Brown is a guy that has 1,500 plus yard upside with 10 or more touchdown upside. I believe heavily in Jared Goff. I believe heavily in Dan Campbell, and Amon-Ra St. Brown to have yet another great season. This guy has been hitting defenses with the stone cold stunner ever since his rookie season, and I believe that this year will be his best year yet. And while we've talked about all the upside, he is also incredibly safe. This is a guy that barely ever falls outside the top 24, and most weeks he's going to finish inside of the top 8. So Amon-Ra St. Brown is a player that I really do believe is must draft. If you'd rather go with Jamar Chase, then go right ahead. But personally, I would lean with Amon-Ra St. Brown in this scenario. This decision becomes a lot more tough when Bijan or Breece are on the board, and then you kind of have to weigh your opinion on, do I want to go running back or wide receiver? But in this scenario, the decision was made for me. After Amon-Ra St. Brown, Jamar Chase, A.J. Brown, Saquon Barkley, Garrett Wilson, Puka Nacua, who is now injured. I am curious to see how much his ADP falls, or if people are not really going to panic too much, and he's going to be a late first, early second round pick in a majority of drafts. After Puka Nacua, Jahmyr Gibbs, Jonathan Taylor, Marvin Harrison Jr., Kyren Williams, and Derrick Henry. Now, there's currently a humongous elephant in the room, and that elephant is Brandon Ayuk. What is going to happen with Brandon Ayuk? Is he going to be a 49er? Is he going to get traded? Now, to me, it feels much more likely that he gets traded at this point, but there are a lot of different landing spots being discussed. Personally, if I was to just have to choose, I think he'll end up as a Pittsburgh Steeler with his dad, Mike Tomlin. If you don't know what I'm referencing, look up a picture of Mike Tomlin, look up a picture of Brandon Ayuk. Those motherfuckers look identical, but at the end of the day, it feels like Brandon Ayuk will get moved, and that is going to adjust the ADPs of Debo, Kittle, Purdy, right? Those guys could move in ADP because of it. I think Debo's ADP would move up, but there's also a scenario where Brandon Ayuk is gone and now another receiver joins the 49ers team, and that could mean that instead of maybe moving Debo up significantly, maybe you just move him up a slight notch, which is something we'll discuss once the fucking trade actually happens, assuming that the trade happens. So right now, I am a fan of ETN, Pacheco, Achane, Rachaad White, James Cook, right? But I feel like one of these guys could be available for me in the third round. And based upon how this is a 2 wide receiver start, 2 flex start league in a full PPR format, I don't really feel like I need to draft a running back at this spot. Best receivers available are Davante Adams, Chris Olave, and Drizzy Drake London. I have Drake London ranked the highest. Davante Adams is definitely the safest wide receiver in this range, but I've talked about Davante Adams a bunch, and I really just don't see him being a league winner at the wide receiver position. And the reason why I say that is because I feel like in Las Vegas, a team you know damn well wants to run the rock gently down the stream. Davante Adams could easily be wide receiver 13 through 16, I would say, by the end of the season. And you wouldn't feel like you got absolutely screwed drafting him in the second round. But I also feel like his upside to win you your league is very low. Now, Drake London is much more of a boom or bust pick. There's a lot more risk with Drake London, right? We haven't really seen Drake London play well for a long stretch of games. But now he gets a real quarterback. Now he gets a coaching system around him to be able to push him further. I liked what I saw out of Drake London in the couple of years he's been in the NFL. Again, has it been consistent? The answer to that would obviously be a big fat no, but I do believe once he is in this situation with a quarterback that can actually aim the ball near him, with a quarterback that isn't going to have the ball dribbling his fucking way like they're playing basketball, right? A bounce pass from Jason Kidd from Mr. Desmond Ridder. Instead, the ball will actually be near Drake London, and he can catch it. And I also think the scheme is going to be a lot better for Drizzy Drake London. After Drake London, Isaiah Pacheco, Davante Adams, Travis Etienne, Chris Olave, Sam Laporta, Travis Kelce, Pat Mahomes, Josh Allen, Devon Achane, Michael Pittman, Josh Jacobs, and Rachaad White. Very interesting start for Team 1. Now, I'm definitely someone that would be a little bit nervous going running back, tight end, quarterback as my first 3 picks, but this team has a chance to have the tight end 1, the quarterback 1, and the running back 1 all on the same team. The team before us going robust running back fantasy counselor style with Bijan, Isaiah Pacheco, and Rachaad with 2 A's White. So, my opinion on James Cook is very simple. I really like James Cook. It's simple, like Jack from Tropic Thunder. You make me happy. But James Cook is a really talented player. Once they switched their offensive coordinator, we saw James Cook be a lot more involved in the offense. He was already pretty involved, but then they put it into the next gear. And James Cook is a guy that has been allergic to the end zone, but I do believe he's a guy that will be scoring more this season without Stephon Diggs. I think the MO of the offense might be more focused on James Cook in the red zone. I think James Cook is an incredibly talented player. Would I prefer to get him in the 4th round? 100%. But I know damn well, picking at the 307, we're just chilling in the middle. By the time things swing back around, with every team having just one running back, the odds that one of these guys that I really like, and would even feel confident picking in the 4th round, probably will not come back to me. So I am going to select James Cook here of the Buffalo Bills. I think that there's a lot of kind of pessimism. That would be like destroying pests, maybe. I don't know, but whatever. You guys know what the fuck I mean. And now people are going to say in the comments, Nick, you dumbass, you don't know this word. But there are a lot of people that are kind of cautious with James Cook, with this Bills offense as a whole. But I loved what I saw at the end of last season. James Cook is a very competent pass-catching running back, and you want that upside in a PPR league. He could easily outscore his running back 13 ADP, pick 34, so a slight reach for James Cook, but I had a feeling that the computers were going to give me a reach around Karen from Plankton's wife style from SpongeBob. I really feel as though the running backs are just going to go, right? If I don't take James Cook, I might be stuck with Kenneth Walker in the 4th round. And at that time, I just wouldn't even draft a running back. I would just start with 4 wide receivers and maybe draft a quarterback or a tight end. After James Cook, Jalen Hurts, Brandon Ayuk, Mike Evans, Jalen Waddle, Nico Collins, Joe Mixon, Alvin Kamara, Kenneth Walker III, Stephon Diggs, and DK DK Metcalf. So looking at the running backs in this range, Aaron Jones, Ramondre Stevenson, James Conner, David Montgomery. Looking at quarterbacks, Lamar, Anthony Richardson, tight ends, Trey McBride, Mark Andrews. To me, it is very clear what the pick is here, and it is Cooper Kupp. With Puka Nacua suffering an injury, sure, I understand that it's not the worst injury on earth, and he'll be good to go for week number 1. But with how much buzz Cooper Kupp has been getting recently, I was already whipping out the knee pads to talk about Cooper Kupp before all of this hype has been coming out of training camp. Even before that, I was telling you guys that Cooper Kupp was going to bounce back. He was going to have a huge season. And while I still think Puka Nacua will probably outscore him, if Cooper Kupp is available in the 4th round, you should be taking him every single time. Every single time. Unless, of course, you're playing in a league where it's 2 wide receivers, 1 flex spot, and you've already drafted 3 wide receivers. Sure, I don't think you should take Cooper Kupp in that scenario, but Cooper Kupp is a guy that could easily finish inside of the top 10 at the wide receiver position. Prior to last season, everyone was talking about how Cooper Kupp was one of the best wide receivers in the NFL, and magically after 1 down season, everyone's all panicky about him. I also like DJ Moore as well. I have DJ Moore ranked ahead of him, but I'm starting to think that in the next rankings video, and when I update my rankings over on Patreon, that I am going to move Cooper Kupp up even higher. I have caught the Cooper Kupp fever, but had I have not had Cooper Kupp available at this spot, I would have been ecstatic to draft DJ Moore. The team just paid him. We saw it on Hard Knocks. If anyone is watching Hard Knocks, they paid him the big bucks. DJ Moore, to me, the clear number 1 receiver on this team. And DJ Moore was putting up humongous numbers with Tyson Bagent and Justin Fields under center. I get they add Keenan Allen, they add Rome Odunze, but I still believe that DJ Moore will be the clear number 1 wide receiver on the Bears, and I think that Caleb Williams is that guy. After Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel, DJ Moore, Lamar Jackson, Trey McBride, Malik Neighbors, and Devontae Smith. Zay Flowers to open up the 5th, Aaron Jones, Short King, Kyler Murray, Mark Andrews, CJ Stroud, and Amari Cooper. Deebo Samuel's ADP is going to go, in my opinion, into the 2nd round if Amari Cooper doesn't get sent to the 49ers if they're doing a trade. I read a rumor that maybe Amari Cooper would get traded to the 49ers in the Brandon Ayuk trade. If Brandon Ayuk is gone and they don't bring in another competent pass catcher, Deebo Samuel is a guy that, even though I have been one of the number 1 Deebo Samuel haters, you just have to. You just have to move him up because the upside would be bananas. Ricky Pearsall is already hurt. CMC's banged up. I mean, things are lining up if Brandon Ayuk gets traded for Deebo Samuel to have some crazy Skeleton King season where he is the reason why you win your league. So his ADP is going to go through the roof, as is George Kittle's. I have been someone that is pretty nervous about George Kittle, a little pessimistic. That's the word we were looking for a little bit earlier that people probably already commented in the comment section. But George Kittle is a guy that if Ayuk isn't there, like, you could argue to rank him inside of the top 3 at the tight end position. So in terms of quarterbacks, we got Anthony Richardson, Joe Shiesty, Dak Prescott, all still available. Tight ends, Dalton Kincaid, Evan Ingram, Kyle Pitts. Wide receivers, Christian Kirk, T. Higgins, George Pickens. Pickens is a guy that right now I'm kind of standoffish with because if they bring in Brandon Ayuk, I don't necessarily think that would completely devalue George Pickens, but it wouldn't make me excited, right? It would definitely be a stonks down for George Pickens. So I think we're going to end up going wide receiver here. We just take a AR-15, Anthony Richardson, in so many of these mock drafts. Someone in the comment section a couple of days ago called him Anthony Injured Son, and they're a little bit scared to draft him. But I really think that Anthony Richardson is a very high upside pick. Sure, he could end up busting. He could end up getting hurt and absolutely flushing your season down the goddamn toilet. But I think the upside is just far too high for me to avoid him in a lot of scenarios. Speaking of upside, I think Christian Kirk has huge upside in this Jacksonville Jaguars offense. I think that Tank Dell has huge upside in Houston. I think T. Higgins is going to bounce back. I like George Pickens. Terry McLaurin's kind of a guy that I'm just not ecstatic about. I mean, for years we've been talking about this is the season for Terry McLaurin. It never happens. This is the quarterback that's going to fully unlock Terry McLaurin, and it never happens. But the guy is incredibly talented. So I'm not saying to fade him. It's just I am not the highest on him compared to these other players. I think there is a small chance Tank Dell could swing back to us in the 6th round. Tank Dell is also probably the riskier guy here because Tank Dell could end up as the wide receiver 3, buried Undertaker style by Stephon Diggs and Nico Collins, but I think he'll end up being the number 2. But Christian Kirk feels like the safest bet with a lot of upside as well. A couple of years ago, Christian Kirk was the guy you needed to win your fantasy football championship. I know he had a bit of a down year last season, but the Jacksonville Jaguars offense on paper looks very, very good. They added in some other pass catchers. None of those guys, though, can hold a candle to Mr. Christian Kirk, who I believe has any given week upside to be a top 12 guy and will very consistently finish inside of the top 24. He's coming off the board right now as the wide receiver number 26. After Christian Kirk, we see George Kittle, Dalton Kincaid, Anthony Richardson, George Pickens, Tank Dell, Kyle Pitts, Higgins, James Conner, Keenan Allen, and Ramondre Stevenson. If you guys have enjoyed today's video thus far, please make sure that you hit that subscribe button down below. If you're new, whether you are new to the channel or not, please make sure you leave a like on today's video. So, looking at the board here, our team is James Cook, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Drizzy Drake London, Cooper Kupp, and Christian Kirk. Would have considered Tank Dell here because, you know, while I am pretty high on Christian Kirk, I can understand how things could go wrong, right? Because of the fact that the Jaguars completely imploded on themselves at the end of last season, but that's mainly because of the Lawrence injury. I do like Christian Kirk a lot, though, but Tank Dell would have also been a nice pick. But now it almost feels like we're in the range where we should be going back to the running back position here. I like Evan Ingram, but I'm starting to worry a little bit about Evan Ingram because the more and more you look into it, you realize that right when Christian Kirk got hurt is when Evan Ingram started flourishing. Now, Evan Ingram will still be relatively consistent, but he is a guy that gets locked up, don't let me out, Akon style out of the end zone. This is a guy that is not going to be a touchdown score big time for you. If you click on his thing here on FantasyPros, it will tell you how many touchdowns he had last season. He had just 4. I think he could get like 5 or 6, but 6 is the highest he's ever scored in his career in New York with the Giants back-to-back seasons with 4. Again, he's going to be very consistent for you, but the upside isn't really all that significant. So we're probably just going to go running back here. Had I have drafted Jamar Chase, I would have drafted Joe Burrow for the stacking upside. Now, do I think that you need to stack in redraft? No, but I do like the added upside that it adds to your lineup every single week, right? Because if Jamar Chase is absolutely deep dick in a defense, then Joe Burrow's probably having a huge game as well, right? But we have Amon-Ra St. Brown, so we don't need to force the narrative here and draft Joe Burrow. Looking at the running backs, David Montgomery, Zamir White, DeAndre Swift, Najee Harris, and Jaylen Warren. I have seen so many people kind of poo-poo David Montgomery because they want to really give the Sukalamink special to Jahmyr Gibbs. And while I do love me some Jahmyr Gibbs, I think David Montgomery is going to still be a very consistent piece for fantasy football that could score multiple touchdowns in any given game. If Jahmyr Gibbs was to get hurt, David Montgomery could end up being a league winner. Now, I know it's a little bit confusing drafting a handcuff in the 6th round, but since I already have a running back with super high upside in James Cook, David Montgomery being my running back 2 feels perfectly fine, right? And then maybe later on in the draft, we find that golden ticket Willy Wonka style, right? We find that deep down in the fucking swamp with Shrek running back that ends up being that league winner. Zamir White, a little bit more risky, a little bit more upside though. So if you wanted to go that way, I'd be fine selecting Zamir White here. DeAndre Swift's a guy that I haven't been really drafting at all. I do really like the Chicago Bears offense, but But I do think that DeAndre Swift is in a very solid competition there for touches in Chicago. And if I'm being honest with you, when you compare him to the other running backs on the team, it's not like DeAndre Swift is levels above those guys, in my opinion. After David Montgomery, Joe Burrow, DeAndre Swift, Calvin Ridley, Terry McLaurin, Rome Odunze, Chris Godwin, Rashee Rice, Jaden Riley Reed, Deontay Johnson, Zamir White, Najee Harris, Raheem Mostert, and we are back up on the clock here. Evan Ingram has continued to fall here, so he could be a part of our plan here. But I would be fine also just drafting Jake Ferguson in the next round. Look at running backs, Jaylen Warren, Tony Pollard. I have started to find a sweet spot for Javonte Williams. I talked about him yesterday in my league-winning running backs videos. Not videos. It's not like it's two videos. It's just one. Hollywood Brown, JSN, DeAndre Hopkins, Ladd McConkey, just a bunch of injured wide receivers over here. Obviously, Hollywood Brown, JSN, Addison, Watson did get banged up yesterday. Cortland Sutton, Worthy. Those guys are healthy, though. But I think we're going to go with Dak. Now, Dak Prescott is a guy that is relatively polarizing, right? But just because the guy ends up looking like a steaming pile of dog shit, even though he ends up playing like Stevie Wonder in the playoffs, Dak Prescott is a guy that is going to put up huge numbers in the regular season. He has CeeDee Lamb, Jake Ferguson, Jalen Tolbert, Brandon Cooks to throw the ball to. Dak Prescott feels like a very safe pick at the quarterback position with upside any given week to be inside of the top 3. He's not a huge rushing quarterback, which is definitely a thing that we have been looking at when it comes to drafting a quarterback, right? We know that the rushing upside really heavily unlocks a quarterback's potential to be the quarterback number 1, but while he only scored 2 total rushing touchdowns last year, Dak's a guy that could get, like, his first 3 seasons, he scored 6 rushing touchdowns every single year. Now, is that the most likely scenario? No, but I could see him increasing to 4 rushing touchdowns, which would help him a ton. Again, he feels like a very safe bet at the quarterback position. So in the 7th round, I'm fine drafting Dak Prescott. And again, I do think he gets a lot of unnecessary hate, especially from the Dallas Cowboys fans. So after Dak Prescott, Jonathan Brooks, Tony Pollard, Hollywood Brown, Jordan, love me tender, love me sweet, Jordan Addison Ray, Brock Purdy, Jaylen Warren, Austin Eckler, Caleb Williams, and Christian Watson. Looking at the board right now, I think there's a chance that Jake Ferguson falls back to us in the next round, but I don't think that's the most likely scenario. And I do want to stack Dak Prescott with Jake Ferguson. I do think that Jake Ferguson does have more league-winning upside than a lot of people are willing to talk about, right? It seems like when you hear the name Jake Ferguson, a lot of people are just talking about him as being dependable, as being a guy that is very reliable for you. But there's a guy that saw 100-plus targets his first season, really being the guy there in Dallas. 71 receptions, 761 receiving yards, and 5 total touchdowns. This is a guy that is big. He's a guy that could be scoring more touchdowns. I could see him scoring 8+ touchdowns, and I get to add him on with Dak Prescott. Again, multiple 15, 18+ point games last season. The tight end position does start to become a lot more of a disaster after these guys in Evan Ingram, Jake Ferguson. I'm really starting to heat up on Pat Freiermuth, but this time we're going to go ahead and get Jake Ferguson and get that stack. Again, some people might be against stacking because, Nick, if the Dallas Cowboys have a shitty game, you know what's going to happen? Jake Ferguson and Dak Prescott are probably going to have bad weeks together. I understand that, but to me, the upside is why I want to draft it. I'm not drafting my fantasy team all of the time to be the safest guys possible. Sure, early on, you can try to wrap the rubber around your squad, keep it as safe as possible, but deeper and deeper into the draft, I want to get more risky. I will note I have Evan Ingram ranked ahead of Jake Ferguson, but because of the stacking upside, that's why I went with Jake Ferguson. It said that we reached a little bit. I do think Jake Ferguson could have been back there for us in the 9th round, but you never know. This team in front of us didn't have a tight end, and with teams already taking fucking defenses, the computer might take 2 tight ends by the time we get our first tight end. That happens with real people as well. If you're drafting with your friends, you're drafting with your cousin, you're drafting with your office guys, your college buddies, right? These people are as unpredictable as it gets. So you got to make sure that you get your guy before things really start to fall apart, because I've done it. I've waited on the quarterback position, and then I'm sitting there with a thumb up my ass, and then guess what happens? Someone takes two quarterbacks, then I'm stuck with like the quarterback 19, and sure, the quarterback 19 off of the board this year would be Stafford, so I wouldn't be that pissed. But then once I draft Stafford, I'm like, oh, I probably have to draft another quarterback as well, and then that just hurts. So we're going to go ahead and after Jake Ferguson, Xavier Worthy, 9-inch Nicholas Chubb, Brian Robinson, Javonte Williams, Zach Moss, Tajay Spears, Cleveland Browns, Devin Singletary, Chase Brown, 49ers defense, Ladd McConkey, and Keon Coleman. So we saw a hefty running back run. But at this point, I do like Zeke, but I'd rather just wait until the 10th round. I think he could be available by the time things swing back around. I don't think that JSN will be available, though. JSN is normally a guy that goes a little bit higher, but I do think that there's a lot of people that kind of have PTSD when it comes to JSN, right? They loved his tape out of college. They loved the upside last season. They drafted him higher than I'm going to be able to get him right now in the 9th round. And then they kind of got screwed. He didn't have the best season, but based upon how the coaches are talking up JSN, a new system, I think that JSN could blow his ADP out of the water and be a guy that is in our flex spot ahead of Christian Kirk. And again, if something was to happen to these other wide receivers, you need backup plans. Something I haven't talked about too much and haven't really put a lot of emphasis on early on in videos, which is something I need to do as we get deeper and deeper into August in terms of these mock drafts, is talking about bye weeks. Now, I get it. If you draft two quarterbacks, you definitely don't want to have Dak and another quarterback on bye 7. If you draft two tight ends, you don't want to have Jake Ferguson and another tight end on the same bye week. But at running back, receiver, there are guys that are right now in our starting lineup, knock on wood, we don't root for injuries, right? But they'll miss games. They might not even be healthy by week number 7 or 5, whenever you need to replace them. So don't worry too much about bye weeks. You're going to trade players off your team, cut players off your team. So I don't really panic too much about that. And I think the running backs that come back will be fine with. So we're going to go ahead and draft JSN here. Again, drafting strictly for that upside. D-Hop is falling due to his injury. Strained knee, could miss 4 to 6 weeks. It seems like he'll be ready for week 1. But that's probably going to be a scenario where he pushes himself to be back. And then that could end up leading to re-injury. And he also probably won't look very good for the first couple of weeks if he rushes back. Again, I'm as much of a doctor as Johnny Sins, but I definitely understand how injuries impact players. I've been playing fantasy for a long fucking time, and typically it's a good idea to, by the time we get very close to fantasy drafts, if a guy is banged up and it's not like, oh, their pinky toe hurts a little bit, right? Or, oh, they have a stomach ache, right? If it's something a little bit more serious, typically avoiding them is honestly probably your best bet. After JSN, Baltimore Ravens defense, Trey Benson, Gus Bus Edwards, DeAndre Hopkins, Ezekiel Elliott, Blake Corum, Evan Ingram, Jameson Williams, Jerome Ford, F-150, and Zach Charbonnet. I am very disappointed that Jerome Ford ended up coming off of the board. So now we are just going to spam click the running back position so that we can find a running back that is going to outperform David Montgomery. Now, again, David Montgomery is very safe. He has significant upside if something was to happen to Jahmyr Gibbs. But when Gibbs is playing, he's probably just going to be around 10 points every single week, which, again, it's fine, but it's not necessarily something you are super excited about. But what you can be excited about is those games where he scores the multiple touchdowns, or those games where he houses a 40-yard run, something like that. I still think Dave Montgomery is a valuable 6th-round pick, and especially in this scenario with the team build we have, where we have such loaded wide receivers, we've got a solid quarterback, a solid tight end, and we have that hero running back. I like the idea of drafting Dave Montgomery in the 6th round. Does he have the most upside compared to a guy like Zamir White? I would definitely say no. But I still think that David Montgomery might even outperform my thoughts of being like a 10-point safety net kind of guy. He could average more points than that, and I was a huge David Montgomery fan last year, and that paid dividends. So the question here is, who is going to be available by the time things swing around? Because I think we can just keep spamming running back, and I think we'll be able to get Rico Dowdle in the next round. So we'll go Chuba Hubbard here. Now, Chuba Hubbard isn't a guy that I really see being a league winner. I think his teammate Jonathan Brooks will end up being that. Jonathan Brooks had a clean ACL tear, meaning he didn't tear his ACL, his LCL. I think there's a PCL as well. Again, I'm not much of a doctor, but Chuba Hubbard will be the lead back early on, and they will eventually go back to Jonathan Brooks. The question is, how good will Jonathan Brooks look? Now, I am going to take the risk a ton on Jonathan Brooks because I believe that guy's a very talented player, and I think the Carolina Panthers are going to take a step to the next level. But Chuba Hubbard could end up being like trade bait to maybe the Jonathan Brooks owner, or he could just end up, maybe Jonathan Brooks comes back, it doesn't look like himself, and the Panthers offense takes it into higher gear, which I believe they will. So Chuba Hubbard is a perfectly fine pick. He's a fine pick here that we could play any given week early on in the season, but we are going to make up for that kind of a pick with more high upside picks at the running back position, because again, I don't really think Rico Dowdle will come off the board by the time we get to pick again. Again, I'm not too worried about drafting based upon the bye week. So after we went ahead and drafted Chuba Hubbard, we saw Tyler Lockett, Brian Thomas Jr., Cortland Sutton, Antonio Gibson, J.K. Dobbins, Tyler Algier, Kendre Miller, Rico Dowdle, Jaleel McLaughlin, Mike Williams, Romeo Doubs, Khalil, Shakira. So we were not going to be able to get some of those later round running backs that I wanted, but we can still get Ty Chandler. Now, I am as big of a fan as it gets as Aaron Jones. We know Aaron Jones isn't the dictionary definition of healthy. Ty Chandler has shown us in the past that he can be consistent, and I do believe that the Minnesota Vikings offense is going to look to run the ball at a higher rate with Sam Darnold or with J.J. McCarthy under center. So I think that Ty Chandler in this scenario is a very solid pick. After Ty Chandler, Jerry Jeudy, New York Jets defense, David Njoku, Pat Freiermuth, Marshawn Lloyd, Brock Bowers, Roshan Johnson, Chicago Bears, Jalen Wright, Elijah Mitchell. Now, this team's running back room is not going to look the best outside of James Cook. And I do like Dave Montgomery, but this is what the waiver wire is used for, right? We have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wide receivers that I feel immensely confident in. So we're not going to have to be picking up wide receivers off the waiver wire very often. Now, obviously, if we find that star, the next Puka Nacua, sure, we're going to go ahead and try to pick him up. But I really do think that our waiver wire fab, if this is a fab league, we're just hunting for the next good running back, that next league winner potential running back, the next Kyron Williams type of guy. So leaving the draft with kind of suspect running back room in a league where you can be starting 4 wide receivers at all time doesn't really hurt all that bad in my opinion. Now, there's going to be people that watch this and are like, Nick, I could not leave my draft with these running backs, Nick. I'm scared, right? And you'd be like very nervous. But to me, I know how to utilize the waiver wire. I make waiver wire videos every single week. I know what to do in this scenario, so I'm not really panicking all that much. But again, I know people in the comment section are going to be like, Nick, this draft sucks donkey cock because of this. But at the end of the day, I really do like this team. Dak and Jake Ferguson with James Cook, Dave Montgomery, Amon-Ra St. Brown, Drake London, Cooper Kupp, Christian Kirk. I think all of Amon-Ra St. Brown, Drake London, and Cooper Kupp could finish inside the top 12 at wide receiver. Christian Kirk could be top 24. If James Cook ends up as a top 10 running back and Montgomery ends up being a reliable running back too, this team could easily win the league again. And plus, there's going to be waiver wire pickups, and we could find that league-winning running back. So we're just going to keep taking shots at the running back position. Joe Mixon has been hurt. We haven't seen Joe Mixon at practice. I get that Dameon Pierce absolutely sold you up the river last season, but I do think if something was to happen to Joe Mixon, knock on wood, Dameon Pierce would be the guy. And there have been reports that he is looking better in training camp this year compared to what we saw last season. I get that Devin Singletary kicked him to the curb last year, but I do still think that Dameon Pierce isn't some complete and utter bottom of the barrel schlub like we saw last season. And we are going to close it out with a wide receiver because while we do kind of want to try to find that high upside running back too, we do need to be starting 4 wide receivers every single week. So leaving the draft with just 5 would be a little bit silly in my opinion. Best wide receivers available: Joshua Palmer, Rashid Shaheed, Brandon Cooks, Josh Downs, Jahan Dotson, Gabe Davis, Adam Thielen, Demario Douglas, Dontavian Wicks, Jalen Polk, Michael Wilson, I've seen some hype for, Darnell Mooney, who I'm starting to really like, Wandale, who, if Daniel Jones has a bounce back and if the team just works a little bit better under that tubby coach they've got, maybe things will work better for Wan'Dale. I think he's talented. They're talking about how he's getting some rushing opportunities there. I love Rashad Bateman, but as always, the bastard is hurt. I like Demarcus Robinson as well. We'll go with Joshua Palmer, though, this time. I think there's a good chance he ends up as the wide receiver 1 on this team. Now, I know all offseason I've been talking about how run-heavy they are, why you want to attack the running back position. But if you can get the wide receiver 1 on a Justin Herbert offense, and I'm not going to sit here and fucking massage the grundle of Justin Herbert, the pervert, like a lot of people do, but I am a big fan of Joshua Palmer. The guy filled in well for the injuries last season that happened to Keenan Allen and Magic Mike Williams. So I like Joshua Palmer. I think in terms of skill set with Ladd McConkey banged up, he is probably the most talented wide receiver on this roster. And Quentin Johnston couldn't catch fucking COVID when COVID was running rampant, right? He wouldn't have gotten the bubonic plague during the Black Plague, right? This guy, it could be the most viral disease, a new thing, and he wouldn't get it, right? He literally cannot catch anything. He has hands for feet. After Josh Palmer, I'm Shaheed, Rashid Shaheed, Bucky Irving, Dalton Schultz, Dallas Cowboys, Tua Tagovailoa, Justin Tucker the fucker, Kenneth Gainwell, Malai Corley. We saw Jared Goff, and then Luis. How the fuck do you say this guy's name? Luis Reese. Zammit sounds like something you would yell if you stubbed your toe in a fucking cartoon. I have no idea why someone's taking the running back 4 on the Chiefs, but I digress. So now we're going with our defense. Strategy for the defense. If you want to draft a defense, playing up against a not-so-hot opponent in week number 1, that's what you want to do at the defense position. You might be thinking, Nick, what happens after week 1? If they have a not-so-hot week 2 matchup, you drop them like it's hot. If they do, you can continue to play them. We are not drafting defenses based upon how great the defense is. We are drafting the defense based upon the amount of upside they have in that matchup and based upon the opponent that they are playing. The Steelers open the season up against the Atlanta Falcons, and while I do believe that under Kirk Cousins and friends, they are going to be a much better offense, I do think that TJ Watt and the defensive line are going to be able to get to Kirk Cousins in this game. And I overall feel as though the Pittsburgh Steelers are a solid defense. So that sways me that way. Again, I'm not just completely thinking, it's all about the matchup. While it is, the tiebreaker that I would use is how good are the Steelers defense compared to this other defense that might have a slightly more ideal matchup. The Steelers defense is really good. So I'm happy to select the Pittsburgh Steelers here. We went ahead and took the Steelers, and then after that, we are just going to go with best kicker available. After the Steelers, Cole Kmet, Taysom Hill, Darnell, here comes the Mooney, and a bunch of kickers and defenses. Want to go best kicker available. Let's go with Jake Moody of the San Francisco 49ers. So that is going to go ahead and complete our draft here. So to recap our squad, we got Dak Prescott as our starting signal caller. Our running backs are James Cook and David Montgomery. Our wide receivers are Amon-Ra, St. Brown, Drake London. Our tight end is Jake Ferguson. Our flexes are Cooper Kupp and Christian Kirk. Kicker is Jake Moody. Defense is the Steelers. Our bench is comprised of JSN, Chuba Hubbard, Ty Chandler, Damian Pierce, and Joshua Palmer. So let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. Am I being a little bit too risky at the running back position for your liking, or are you fine starting off the year with James Cook and Dave Montgomery? Because I feel pretty confident in that. I love our wide receiver depth. I love Dak, and I also love Jake Ferguson. So this is one of the best teams that I have drafted. I know, though, there are going to be tons of people that don't like this team. So let me know down below in the comment section. I love you guys all so much. I'll see you guys soon with another banger of a video. Check out one of the videos on your screen if you haven't seen them already. Hit that subscribe button. Hit that like button down below. Love you guys. Have a great one. As always, good boy.